Hello, hello, hello.
And welcome to the Hildebrand Law Firm topic for today.
And today's topic is going to be on light blue suits. How did this happen?
And dark blue suits.
That we look almost exactly the same.
Don't sleep on the dark blue suits, Kirsten,
I
okay?
guess so. I guess so. So, anyway, we are really excited to speak with you today about a very important issue, and that is your healthcare decisions and who gets to make your healthcare decisions if you are not able to do so.
What this document is that a lot of people come to me and they say, Matt, one of my biggest concerns is if I ever become incapacitated, if I ever get in an accident, if I'm ever in a coma, who makes these decisions for me? Is it my kid? Is it my spouse? Is it my brother or sister? And my response is, it's whoever you want. One of the wonderful things about estate planning is that estate planning starts with you. You can make the choice while you're coherent, while you're able to. You can make the choice as to who takes over. And this is a very simple, very easy document, but it's a very powerful document. And that document is called the Power of Attorney for Healthcare.
Because one of the things that we all need to recognize is that sometimes a non decision is a decision. So I had a case recently where a father of 6 children owned several rental properties, and he went into one of his rental properties. I want to say he was in his mid 50s, and he never came out of that rental property that he was trying to do some plumbing in. And he was found by one of the kids a few hours later, and he had, unfortunately, a massive stroke. So, what ensued after that was, of course, a very worried trip to the emergency room, and he was put on life support. And then the question was, who has the ability to make healthcare decisions for this man who did not have any power of attorney for medical issues? And so then the answer is the courts have to make that decision. And so you have to file what's called a guardianship action so that somebody can take over legally as the guardian of that person and make medical decisions for him. And the medical decisions were very serious in this case. Do we keep him on life support or do we not? Well, what happened after the guardianship action was filed was a massive family fight, because there was also a sister of the mid 50s man who really wanted to be the one making all of these decisions. And so she was more than happy to point out to the court maybe some things that the kids had done in the past that were not responsible, that might lend themselves to having the court think that they were not the right people to make medical decisions for their dad. And so this really highlights one very important point. The way that the court looks at someone is a lot different than the way that you may look at someone. Let me give you an example. Suppose you're a child, went out and made a mistake when they were 22 years old. They got a DUI. And it ended up being a life-changing event, and they got on the straight and narrow, and now there have been no issues. If you come to Hildebrand Law Firm and you say, I want to make my child, let's call her Jane, I want to make Jane be my healthcare power of attorney, we're not going to ask you questions like, well, does she have anything that she did when she was young and stupid? Because we know that you are best informed and best capable of making that decision. If that same decision is put before a court in front of a judge, that judge will be presented with information like that. And it is very possible that the judge will decide that that is a legitimate basis to not have that same Jane be considered an appropriate guardian. So that's how things get complicated when you don't make a decision to have a healthcare power of attorney in place.
Right, because what's interesting too is that, going back to what you talked about decisions, actions get done regardless of when the decision is made. If the decision is made when you're coherent, best case scenario. If the decision is made when you're not coherent, worst case scenario. And that stems to a few things. One of the things that I love the most about the power of attorney for healthcare is that it really puts you in the driver's seat for if this situation happens. We never know if one of us is going to be in a coma, if one of us is going to have dementia, Alzheimer's, if one of us is going to have any sort of these events where we're not the best up here, or maybe we have an accident and something needs to get done. Not everybody has that conversation with their spouse or their children. If I'm ever on life support, what I want you to do. It's not a dinner table conversation that most people tend to have. And so that's why in a document like this, it's so simple, it's so quick, but it's so darn important, because one of the biggest issues that I see is people saying, well, I don't know what mom would have wanted. And going back to what you were saying, Kirsten, with the fighting, the 6 kids and the sister, they're not fighting because they want control. They're fighting over what the dad would have wanted.
That's exactly
and
right.
what they think the dad would have wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine if there was a document in place that dad had signed that says, this is what I want. No fighting.
There's also the issue of third parties that get involved too. So another interesting situation that we dealt with here at Hildebrand Law Firm, there was a young dad of 4 kids. I remember all of the kids were under the age of 8 years old, and he decided that he was going to give himself a bit of a break and go off on a hunting trip with his buddies. So he was in his mid-30s. So he went on the hunting trip and had a lot of fun. He and his buddies were at the bar one evening and they got a beer. Nothing crazy, I want to highlight. But then when they went to go back to their hotel room, for some reason, this dad decided that he was going to sit on the end of the flatbed truck where the end was down. So he sits down, and as the driver pulls out of the bar parking lot, he literally goes vertical, flying in the air, and then slams down and was straight on the back of his head. Within probably 20 minutes of him being at the hospital, those doctors knew that his brain was 70% sheared, and there was no way that he was going to survive. Of course, there was no power of attorney for healthcare that was in place. And so they had him on life support, and he was breathing because, of course, he was young and healthy. But unfortunately, it took 10 days to get to the courts and get an appointment of a guardian to be able to make that decision to terminate that life support. And in that 10-day period of time, his entire life insurance of $400,000 was used up on those medical bills. And lest you think that life insurance is safe and nobody can intervene and get paid out of that, that is 100% wrong, I learned. Because what ended up happening is those 4 little kids did not get the benefit of that life insurance policy, and instead the hospital got paid. Now, this is one of those things that could have been completely avoided if there had been somebody who had that power to make that decision right away.
And yes, that's a really powerful story about not having this document in place.
Matt, there is so much more to say about this topic regarding healthcare power of attorney. So I'm thinking that we should split this into 2 just because there is so much more to say.
I think that's a great idea. So please join us next time for part 2, talking about healthcare powers of attorney.
Because we are so interested in protecting your today and your tomorrow. Take care.